Hello, my name is Justin, and I'm an addict. And thanks to my God, the steps, and the fellowship of other addicts, I'm sober one day at a time since June 19th, 2015. And for that, I am eternally grateful. Welcome to the RICO 12 speaker meeting. We are an organization whose addictions include alcohol, drugs, lust and sex, food and gambling, just to name a few. We come together from all places, faiths, and backgrounds to learn the similarities of addiction and to gain tools and hope from others who are walking a similar path. We invite recovering addicts with at least 1 year sobriety and who are actively working their recovery in their respective fellowships to share their experience, strength, and hope on a live Zoom meeting each Friday at noon Central Time for 20 to 25 minutes. Then we, the live audience, get the opportunity to ask questions of the speaker for another 20 to 25 minutes. In order to ask questions, if you're here live, please type them in the Q&A link at the bottom of your Zoom window. If you are hearing this podcast recorded or would like to participate as a live audience member, or if you'd like to be a guest speaker in a future meeting, please go to www.rico12.com, that's RECO12.com, to learn more and submit your email address there to receive weekly invitations or to submit to become a guest speaker. RICO 12 is an ad-free service, and we appreciate your help in keeping it that way. We gratefully accept contributions to help cover the costs of the Zoom platform, podcast platform, web hosting, and administrative costs. To contribute, you can go to www.rico12.com/support, or you can click the link to PayPal in the chat of the live meeting. When you contribute, please specify the meeting number. This is meeting number 23. If you have also found value in RICO 12, please take a moment to go to the podcast platform of your choosing and leave a rating and review. It helps us work our 12th step by carrying the message of recovery to more addicts who suffer. Last week's meeting was with Cindy H., and she was on overcoming the elixir of codependency and sexaholism. She had some great points and a very engaging story. If you haven't yet heard her meeting, go and check it out. It's well worth your time. Now, let's introduce our guest speaker for today, Bill M. Here's Bill M. in his own words. He says, "I got booze sober in 1987, had what is probably considered the pink cloud phase for a few years, but about 4 to 5 years into my recovery, I started to feel not right. I struggled for the next 5 years with mild anxiety, but by 10 years of sober, suffered from severe anxiety, which led to a nervous breakdown at 15 years sober. At that low point, I met a man who took me through the steps as set forth in the Big Book and am living anxiety-free since." Take it away, Bill. The floor is yours.
Hi, I'm Bill, and I usually introduce myself as an alcoholic, but I'm an addict, an all-around everything addict. My drug of choice was alcohol, but there was a lot of other things going on in my life. I mean, I gave up my sobriety date in AA is June 9th, 1987. I gave up the hard drugs probably, I don't really know, but I know it's probably 3 to 4 years earlier than that. And the way I got off the hard drugs was I just increased the alcohol consumption to deal with me coming off the hard drugs. That probably pushed me into, if I wasn't already a full-blown alcoholic, that certainly pushed me over the line. Anyway, so June 9th, 1987 is my AA sobriety date. As Justin was talking, I got in. I did very well for a number of years. I was quite literally high off the fact that I was sober. But what I didn't realize was that I was really just treading water. I'm an addict. My story is recovery versus sobriety. I would find out the hard way that just being sober, just being whatever your drug of choice is, drug-free, is not enough. As clearly stated in the 12 steps, I had a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps. And I had that finally 15 years into sobriety. But I also had a nervous breakdown as a result of not doing the steps. And what happened over those years is I had a lot of other itches that needed to be scratched. And one of them was right in the sex department. What happened was my untreated alcoholism turned into sex addiction, ruined the marriage that I was in. A relationship of probably pushing, got to be 30 years or more at that point. And I had no idea what was going on. I had no idea that I was addicted to sex. I was just out of my mind with it. Anyway, that brought me to a lower point, actually, than trying to wean myself off of drugs and trying to get off of alcohol, which was really quite hellish. But the sex addiction was actually worse in a much different way. Spiritually, it was certainly a heck of a lot worse. The spiritual bankruptcy that comes off of sex addiction, I'm sure there's a lot of people on listening understand that. So that pushed me over the edge. And I was actually 2 weeks short of my 15th year anniversary in AA when I had a nervous breakdown. And I just, to try to describe it would be very difficult. You lose total control of who you are as a person. Like you don't know what is up and what is down, what is night, what is day, what is in, what is out. You just haven't got a clue. Anyway, a guy that I knew in my early years of AA, I ran into him months earlier, and as I was unwinding mentally, physically, and spiritually, I ran into him, and I would reach out to him when I had this nervous breakdown. And anyway, he saved my life. Long story short, came and got me. He ran me through the 12 steps, told me what my problem was, told me it was me, told me what the solution was, told me it was God. He said, it doesn't matter if you're going to church, you may believe in God, Bill, but you're not doing business with God. So he ran me through those 12 steps, and lo and behold, I had the prescribed effect. I had a spiritual experience as a result. I knew when I got done doing step 7 that I was free. I was free from the anxiety and the depression, which was killing me 15 years sober. And I got free off of the sex stuff for about a couple of years. And then I started to gradually slide back into it. And I could feel, if you've ever had a nervous breakdown, you know exactly what it feels. And you know what the preliminary signs of feeling that. I could feel that coming back on me. I could feel myself descending back into the insanity, the madness. I didn't want to go there, obviously, so I got on my knees one night and I just said, God, I can't do this anymore. I can't go back to where I was. Please help me. Anyway, I ended up finding this organization called All Addicts Anonymous, which I'm very, very, very involved with now. They became the source. They gave me the tools that I needed to deal with the sex addiction, which was, in short, the 4 absolutes, which are nothing but the principles of the program, in a very condensed form. They gave me a lot of other help, told me that if temptation came my way, I was to break into repetitive prayer You got to drive that image or that, whatever that, the imperious urge, you got to drive it off the radar ASAP. So I've been sexually sober since 2008, since I ran into those guys. And a number of years later, I got food sober, flour and sugar. That happened it was 5 years ago, this past October. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm living any kind of, the life here. I mean, I have the same issues that everybody else has, I get a flat tire now and then, car troubles, window in my house that, needs to be changed, the usual, problems with life, but it doesn't twist me up. The whole secret to sobriety, whether it's booze, alcohol, drugs, sex, food, gambling, doesn't matter, is a relationship with God. And for me, I was a churchgoer and I thought I had a relationship with God, but I did not. Simply a relationship with God means doing God's will. I wasn't doing God's will, I was doing Bill's will. I love the AA terminology in spirituality. I love the term higher power. Higher than what? Higher than, my self-will. So that's what I need to find. It's very simple. It's not complicated. There's no bells and whistles. For me, there isn't. When I had my spiritual experience, there was no pie in the sky. There wasn't a shaft of light that came down. There wasn't a choir of angels singing. I didn't see a flock of doves fly by. It didn't burst on me that I was free. I just knew something shifted inside of me, and I knew that I was done. Like I said, a few years later, the sex thing reared its ugly head, and then I got free of that. And let me tell you something. My bottom in with the sex stuff was so much worse than the alcohol and drugs. I know I've already said this. The separation from whatever you call God, a higher power, with the poor sex conduct is so much more devastating than the separation from being an alcoholic or a drug addict. At least it was for me. So what do? For me, I know what God's will for me is. And that's obviously to stay sober in all departments of my life, because you can't pass on anything you don't have. So, and to work with other guys, I work strictly with men. I don't believe that I have any, especially with the sex addiction, for obvious reasons. It's you keep it strictly with men. And I work with, a number of guys, and everybody's doing, everybody's very serious. Most of them are doing quite well with the sex addiction. I remember when All Addicts Anonymous, when I got involved with them saying to me, Bill, this will be the hardest thing you ever did. And I'm thinking, detoxing off of alcohol and going through the madness of trying to get off of hard drugs was, I just figured it couldn't be any worse than that. And it was. So that's what I do. I help other guys that are trying to get sober. I've yet to meet anybody that has one issue in addiction. I'm sorry, I know this is my opinion, but there isn't anybody I've met since 1987 that wasn't jammed up with, alcohol and drugs and alcohol, alcohol and sex, drugs and sex and food. I've yet to meet anybody that's not poly-addicted, cross-addicted, call it what you will. So to think that you can just, put the crack pipe down, put the needles down, put the plug in the jug, that's gonna be the best, that is all you need to do. you're going to find out the hard way that there's work to be done. And, I was told after I wrote my fourth step, I was led from my sponsor. We broke it down into 3 areas. We worked on the resentment portion first. Then we moved on to the fear portion, which ended up being probably the most important portion for me. And then we moved on to the sex piece, which really was, the fear had everything to do, with sex. So, so the big book tells me I'm driven by 100 forms of fear, right? Self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. And that's exactly what it is. I tell myself a lie, I believe the lie, and then I act accordingly. The lie is always driven by fear. Every act of self-centeredness in my life starts off with fear. And I didn't know that going to confession. I didn't know that going to church. I didn't know that going, 12 years of psychotherapy. I didn't know that from going to, hanging around in AA. I found that out when I did a real fourth step and saw that fear was actually running my life. And not that I don't have fear today, of course I do, but I can identify it. I don't go into the world to make believe. I don't pretend that I'm not in fear. And I know when I'm in fear, I know what to do today. I know that I'm not trusting and relying on God. I know, generally speaking, the fear is really an illusion, right? So when I look at the fear, identify where is it coming from. Generally, all my fears come from the second 7-year chunk of my life. If you're into Rudolf Steiner, he breaks everything up into 7 years. And it's not in the first 7 years, that second 7 year from age 7 to 14. Generally speaking, the majority of my fears came in that developmental phase of my life. And here I am, I'm 55 years old when I had the nervous breakdown. I'm still being driven by those fears that for the most part, that I picked up in that, from 7 to 14 year category. And I didn't know it. Today I do. I know what types of fear, I know I have fear of people's opinions. I didn't know that before, but that was the reason I was, that's a lot of it, of what codependency and people pleasing is just essentially, people's opinions. My fear that I want you to like me, and I will adapt my life, the scenario, in my life to get you to like me, even if I don't like you. That's the insanity of the whole thing. I don't have to like you. I just want to make sure you like me. So anyway, it's been great since 2001 is when I did the 12 steps out of the big book, and I've been helping. And then had to be about 3 years later, maybe 2004, 2005, that I got to work on the sex thing, became sexually sober in 2008. And man, what a joy not to fight that piece, not to be thinking that those lies that I tell myself, I'm a man, I'm supposed to think like this. I'm a man, I'm supposed to act like this. I'm a man, I'm supposed to behave like this. I'm a man, this is the way God made me. No, those are the lies I tell myself. What God wants from me is to be happy, joyous, and free. And that's free from the bondage of self. And that from all those things that are driving me, right? The big book says that alcohol, drugs, whatever, sex, it's only a symptom. We have to get down to causes and conditions. And that's what I did with the 12 steps. That's what happens when you do the steps correctly. I mean, I had done the steps prior to my 15, when I had the nervous breakdown, the 15 years. I did a little 2-page, wrote a biography of myself, basically how misunderstood I was in life. And, I did another one on like a Hazelton style. It was strict right from Hazelton. My sponsor had me do. And I'm not saying I didn't get anything out of those things. Of course I did. But I didn't get down to the depth. It wasn't a deep dive, which is when I did the steps laid out right straight out of the big book. There it was all the time. I go to my first AA meeting. What do? The first thing they do is they hand you a big book, and they tell you to read it. I couldn't make heads or tails out of it. I enjoyed the stories in the end. The first 164 pages, I had no idea. It was just all gibberish to me. And I didn't realize it was actually the breakdown of the steps. So I really enjoy the life I have today. Most of my waking moments and passing moments is thinking about some form of sobriety, talking to people in AA, SA. We have a nice little group of guys that we meet every Wednesday night, and we work. There's probably 15 guys, probably 12 of them are just alcoholic addicts, sex addicts. A couple of them are straight sex addicts, and we just work on staying sexually sober. And in the beginning, it's very difficult. But after a while, you break free. It's hard to put into words. I don't care what type of addiction you're jammed up with. There's a detoxing phase. There's a phase when you just can't get the thought of whatever, if it's heroin, if it's crack, if it's booze, you go through a period of time where you cannot get the substance off your mind. And then one day you realize you hadn't thought of it for one day, for one 24-hour period. So there's that white knuckle phase, and that happens with the sex piece too. I have not found a magic bullet. To me, there's not a magic prayer. There's not a magic sponsor. There's not a magic meeting. You go through that initial gut wrenching experience. And I was sober, and I had done the steps out of the big book, that you have to white knuckle this thing, obviously with God. And if you can break free of that and you don't cave into it, that's the growth period. Is for me, that's what happened with me. And that's what I've seen with most guys is you got to gut it out. You got to gut it out. You got to drop to your knees. You got to just say, God, I can't do this. And just help me stay sexually sober for today. And that's what it is. That sex stuff is so, if you talk about one day at a time, that's so important. And the other piece I have found with the sex thing is it's proactive, much more so than AA or NA, is the prayer and meditation is so important in this department. And not prayer and meditation when you're jammed up, prayer and meditation when things are going good. And that's hard to do. Steps 10 and 11, that is the maintenance. Those are called the maintenance steps. That prevents my ego from rebuilding itself. What is the whole 12 steps is an ego deflating process, right? When I get done doing the 12 steps, even if let's say I do step 7, right? I make my amends. My ego is in the process of trying to rebuild itself. So that's what steps 10 and 11 are all about. I'm constantly looking at myself, taking that personal inventory once again in a very, boiled down fashion. It's not a long drawn out thing. I have the ability to look at myself and say, okay, Bill, you're running on a little fear now. What's behind the fear? What's driving it? And I'll identify it. And then I can say, okay, recognizing it is huge. And then you take it to God, instead of just being blindly driven by it. So that's what steps 10 and 11, 10, I live in the the solution, and live in the moment, step 11, get up in the morning. Every day, I do not miss this step. It just keeps me on the beam. I get up, I don't do what's, called in AA, the AA roll. I don't roll out of bed, hit my knees and say, okay, God, help me with a drink and a drug. Now step aside, I'll take it from here, I actually get out of bed and I go downstairs and I meditate. I read a spiritual reading, which kind of sets the mood. And then I meditate for an hour, and it works. I do it 7 days a week. I don't miss this. I don't look at it like it's drudgery. I don't look at it as any different that I comb my hair in the morning, brush my teeth in the morning, or tie my shoes in the morning. It's just part of my life now. There's work. It's not about believing in God. It's about being unblocked from God. I got to get rid of the fear, the resentments, the sex conduct. And once that channel is broke free, I keep it clean today, one day at a time. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill. You and I had the privilege of talking together about a year ago now, if I remember correctly. And in this conversation, I got a lot more angles of things than I did in the last one. And I really appreciate your vulnerability and your willingness to discuss poly addiction or cross addiction, things that oftentimes we overlook in our own journeys. So before we get into questions, once again, reminding the listening audience that's live, if you have questions for Bill, please type them in the Q&A section at the bottom of the Zoom page. It looks like two speech bubbles over the top of each other. And also, Bill, I'd like you to take just another 60 seconds or so to talk a little bit about the fellowship that you mentioned here, All Addicts Anonymous, and how that fellowship helps you.
Well, it helps me to look at addiction in a much broader sense, that this was really very big in my life, to understand that I was not just an alcoholic that had drug issues, that there's a much, the AAA calls it the bird's eye view. I'm flying in more of a 40,000 feet instead of, looking at it, eye to eye, that addiction's a moving target, that I have a primary addiction, but I have a lot of secondary addictions. They're not secondary problems, they're addictions. Now I have my go-to, everybody has their go-to, but it's the secondary ones, and that's what was killing me into my sobriety. And that's what AAA pointed out. And they made it very clear. The one thing that they made very clear to me when I finally got together with them was them saying this will be the hardest thing you ever did, and the only way you can lose is to quit. And if you slip, you just get back on the horse. Don't beat yourself up. Just continue to meditate and continue to walk towards the light. We don't arrive, right? We don't arrive at the light. We walk towards it. And I keep that in mind. But for the grace of God, I've been sexually sober now for some time, as I said. And I got to use all the tools. And I got to remember that, if I put the plug in the jug and then I turn the sex, and then I put the plug in the jug in that department, then what do? It slides over to food. So addiction's a moving target. The big book tells me I'm restless, irritable, and discontent. And those are the three underlying conditions that every addict has. And that's going to be dealt with. And I dealt with it with booze, alcohol and drugs. And then when I put that down and I was unrecovered, that's the whole point about sobriety and recovery. Recovery means I'm free from this stuff. Recovery lets me know that I understand me, that I'm driven by these fears and this poor sex conduct. And that's not God's will for me. And that I can deal with that today. Because I have a much broader look at who I am, and that only came through the inventory process. It didn't come from going to meetings. I'm not knocking meetings. Not meetings support the program of recovery. When meetings become the program of recovery, that's a problem. So I hope I answered your question.
No, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I love that last bit there. Meetings support the program of recovery. That's very helpful, I think. One of the things that you said early on in this speech that really rung out to me that I'd like to dig a little bit deeper on and ask you about, you said, you may believe in God, but you aren't doing business with God. What does that mean to you? And how does that realization change the way you do things with God?
Well, I think if we go back to step 3, that much of the answer to that question lies in step 3, right? In step 3, it says we made a decision to turn our will and our life over to God. Now, we're not turning anything over to God. We're just making a decision to do it. I don't know what I'm turning over to God, because I don't know who I am. I don't know that I'm driven by 100 forms of fear. I don't know that my resentments are based on that nobody is doing anything my way. I don't know that my sex conduct is bad. I just think that I'm made this way. All right. So I can be going to church. I can be, living whatever religion I'm living. But the beauty of AA is I don't have to believe in what I hear from your voice. I don't hear in a priest. I don't hear in a pastor. I don't hear in a rabbi. I don't hear in a drug and alcohol counselor. Where I know you're coming from, I relate to immediately. And that's what I believe in. I believe in your soul. I get hope, not from going to church back then, not from going to guidance counselors, not from going to psychotherapy. I got hope when I heard somebody that had my issue told me there is a solution. That didn't come from anywhere else. Doesn't come from, I don't care, a member of Congress, President of the United States, no matter who it is, no matter how high the greatest psychologist, Freud, Jung, that's what happened, right? Roland Hazard went out and drank. It didn't matter. It's got to come. My belief, my sense of hope that maybe, not that I can do it, that maybe I can do it, comes from another addict, an alcoholic, a sex addict. There is a solution, right? The big book says that nobody likes the self-searching, the leveling of pride, the confession of shortcomings that is required. That's a requirement, right? The requirements for membership is just to walk through the door and say that I want to try this thing, right? There's a willingness to try this. The requirement for success comes off of doing the steps. And it says that right in, the chapter on There Is a Solution. The chapter There Is a Solution is very oddly titled. It should be There Is a Solution and It Isn't You. Because that's what the chapter's all about. Right? The requirement is doing it, and that for successful consummation. That's a big word. A lot of meaning. So.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I've got a follow-up question to that, but I'm first going to read a question that came in from Thomas from our listening audience. Thank you, Thomas. He says, "Thank you, Bill. I love your morning routine. Can you tell us more about what meditation looks like to you? What have you found effective?"
Well, breathing and praying. And praying doesn't mean reciting like a parrot, some canned prayer. I'm not saying a canned prayer isn't good. I'm just saying it doesn't necessarily have to be a canned prayer. It's some form of breathing. What I do, this is what was taught to me, was, you breathe in, try to just for a brief second, stop, breathe out at the bottom of the breath for a brief split second, stop, breathe in deeply. And then, while you're doing this, you can be praying. Whatever kind of prayer. Lord, you can say the serenity prayer. You can say the third step prayer. I have a prayer that I love to say, and it's, God help me to help myself so that I may help others. And I say that when I'm in this breath in, God help me to help myself. And the whole reason why, so that I may help others. And when I say that over and over again, and I breathe, and then you just kind of, boy, if you got anxiety, you want to do this. I had anxiety so bad, I had a nervous breakdown. I haven't had an anxiety attack since I did the steps. But I do the morning meditation. I don't float off the couch. I get up, I do a little stretching exercises. I read a little bit out of a spiritual book. And then I don't have a cup of coffee. I don't go for a jog and then come home and do it. This is kind of like, it's really I don't want to get too stoic here or too far out there, but it's if you can do this while you're still attached to the astro self, the dream state. You come downstairs, you're not having 100% woken up. If you can read something spiritual and then go into meditating with some real slow breathing, and then just with the God of your understanding, just turn to God, right? That it's powerful in a different sense than the type of power that we think of, like the power to, like horsepower, or the power of a jet engine. It's a different kind of power, but you feel it. So I hope I answered Tom's question.
Thank you, Bill.
Breathing and praying, combine the two. You'll figure it out.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Now, when we last spoke about a year ago, you shared an experience about taking your step 3 with your sponsor after you had 15 years of sobriety, had your nervous breakdown, and you were rescued by this man that helped you see and go through the steps as laid out in the big book. Could you please share with those who may not have heard that first conversation you and I had on the Journey Through Life podcast about your experience out in the parking lot taking your step 3 with your sponsor?
Yeah, it was after a meeting, and you do steps 1 and 2. You don't, in a sense, you really don't do them, right? You don't do them in a physical way, not like steps 3 through 12. It's if you look at the steps out of the big book, you'll notice that they italicize the steps from step 3 on, right? Steps 1 and 2 are not italicized. It's more of an understanding. You come to an understanding that you don't have a choice. So you make off of that, right? That's the first 63 and a half pages. Based on that that of your best efforts at life, you are screwed. So, and you don't have to have faith that the program was going to work. I had no faith that the steps was going to work. None. I just mechanically did them, and the miracle happened. So I was out in the park lot. I'd been going to some big book meetings with my sponsor, and he said to me, "Bill, where do you want to do the third step?" And I said, "We can do it in a church, or we can do it at your house or my house, some special place." I said, "No, let's just do it right here." And it was right after a meeting. There were people walking around. We were out in the parking lot. It was. I had the nervous breakdown. It was the end of May, and this was probably in the late summer. I remember it was warm out, and he said, "Right here?" And I'm like, "Yeah, right here. Let's just do it." That was kind of like my way of doing things in life. There was never any planning. I just, headlong, just dive into it. And I'm like, yeah, let's just do this, And so we got down, we said the third step prayer. And I remember, in my typical fashion, the way I do things, which is I want to get into this when I can remember it in a minute, is to not give any thought to it, right? So I jump up. He's still on his knees. I jump up, and I remember dusting my knees off, saying to him, okay, now what do we do? And he was on his knees looking up at me, and he goes, Bill, we are going to do nothing. You and God are going to do a little work. And I had no idea what he was talking about, But let me tell you this. From that, we get up off in the third step, it says, next we launched out on a vigorous course of action, right? So there's no gap between taking the third step and starting your fourth step, right? So he says, you're going to leave here, you're going to go down the street, there's a strip mall, there's a CVS, you're going to pull in, you're going to get yourself a 5-subject notebook, and if you don't have a pen, you're going to get a pen, you're going to start writing. So, and then I was to pray before I wrote. And this is very key. It was because I remember him saying, you pray, God reveals the truth. But that is a template, is this third step of praying and acting, right? So before in life, what do? I act, and then I try to pray my way out of it. God help me, I'll never do that again. God, please get me out of this pickle, I'll never do that again, right? So the third step sets this template for me that it should be prayer and then action. Should be. I'm not saying I'm perfect at this, but I understand it, right? And all the steps, there's a prayer in it, right? So the 7th step is preceded by the 6th step. The 6th step is nothing more than preparation for the 7th step, which is prayer, right? Then I go out and I make my amends, and my sponsor always said, pray and go out and make your amends, right? And, I get up in the morning, what do? Pray, and then I go into the day. At the end of the day, I review my night. So the deal, what the third step really taught me was that my life from that moment on, and I didn't know it at the time, was prayer then action, as opposed to action then prayer, which is always about what the addict is doing.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. And I love that that pray and then act rather than what we've been doing our whole lives. Act and then pray. Get me out of here. I swear I'll never do this again. Oh, that rings so true to me. Thank you for that. And then Bill, I have another request, I guess, of you. It's a question, but it's a request. This topic is recovery versus sobriety, and I love the topic. I'd like to hear you define these 4 terms for me in your own words, and then maybe talk a little bit about living in each of those. First term is abstinence. Second is sobriety. Third is recovery. And 4th is healing. Tell me a little bit about what your definitions of those and how that looks in your own life in recovery.
Well, that they're in that order, that you gave, for a reason. Obviously, you can't have a spiritual experience, high as a kite. You'll have an experience. You may think you've had a spiritual experience. I, took a lot of acid, and I thought I was having spiritual experiences. But to have not a chemically induced spiritual experience, or what I thought would be a sexually induced experience, was to be abstinent is the first step, right? You just got to get rid of whatever the killing drug that's ruining your life. Sobriety is, I'm going to look at it through some kind of emotional sobriety, right? The reason I drank was because I have a spiritual malady, right? I'm restless, irritable, and discontent. The only thing that takes that away is drinking, drugging, sexing, whatever my drug of choice is, right? Briefly, right? It's always briefly. And so I need some kind of emotional sobriety, which came for me for doing the steps. I was still all over the place emotion, high and low. I would have these highs and lows. I was manic depressive. I would go days without sleeping times, and then I would crash. That was just prior to my nervous breakdown. And there was no evenness in life. There was this, I'm high as a kite when everything's going my way, and I'm lower than a whale, when it isn't going my way. away, right? That's a very brief, very narrow look at manic depressive, especially alcoholic or drug-induced manic depression. I'm not talking about clinically people that are clinic. That there is real. I'm talking about most people in AA who think they're depressed. Most people in AA who think they have an anxiety disorder. It's right in the big book. I'm restless, irritable. That's anxiety. And discontent. I'm not happy with what I have, right? If I'm single, I want to be married. If I'm married, I want to be single. If I'm married, I want your wife, not my wife. If I make $100,000 a year, I want to make 200,000. If I make 200,000, I want to make $500,000. And then when I get there, I realize, I was happier when I was poor. So I'm always discontent. Nothing is going to solve the spiritual malady until I do the steps. I see the truth about who I am, that I'm driven by 100 forms of fear, and I'm self-centered. Then I can deal with that. I deal with it through the program, through God, through the program, and I get the support from the people around me who are working the program. Very important. They say hang out with the winners. The winners don't mean somebody that's, got 30 or 40 years of sobriety. The winners are the people that are happy, joyous, and free. As a friend of mine who says, I wouldn't want one day of his sobriety. I was one of those people, 15 years sober, miserable. I get it. That's not the deal, right? And then recovery. To recover from, the bondage of self. Me thinking about me, right? My wants, my needs, my desires. What is it going to take to get there? What lie do I have to take? Looking at you, thinking to myself, what is he thinking? Looking at somebody else saying, what are they thinking? Always trying to be 2 steps ahead of you. I got so many plates in the air, juggling just, they all came crashing down. That isn't sobriety, So you recover. It says in the big book, in the forward to the first edition, we recover from a seemingly hopeless condition of mind and body. Seemingly, right? To appear, only to appear real. It's not real. Yea, though I walk through the valley in the shadows of death. They're just shadows. They're not real. It just appears to be real. So I have this seemingly hopeless condition, and trust me, when you're in the grips of it, it feels hopeless. But there is a solution. It's with you. It's with me. It's with the people on this thread right now. It's going to the right meetings, doing the steps, having a relationship with God, keeping those channels clean by doing 10 and 11 on a daily basis, having some kind of sexual sobriety in your life. And you want to talk about joy? That's what we're looking for, right? Is joy. I look for it in the bottle. I look for it in the crack pipe. I looked for it in sex, food. I'm looking for joy. And it doesn't come anywhere. Right? C.S. Lewis once said that about sex, that the sum total of all my pleasure never amounted to joy. I'm looking for joy. Yeah. And that's recovery.
Awesome. Thank you. I really appreciate that. All right. So before I get into the closing readings here, Bill, do you have any final words of wisdom that you'd like to impart to us before we move into the next portion of closing this down?
Yeah, if you're out there, if you're suffering, it doesn't matter if you're a day sober or 40 years sober, if you're suffering from anxiety, depression, most depression comes off of poor sex conduct. If you're suffering from anxiety and depression, find yourself a good, step study meeting. Get with somebody that has a recovery, and do the steps. If you did it once already, do it again. Do it again, and then then live in 10 and 11. There's a solution. There's a solution. It's in the big book. I have found it nowhere else. I'm not knocking my religion. I still go to my religion. I still believe in my childhood God. But I found the answer in AA through the 12 steps. That's what brought me to God. The truth with a lowercase t, which is the truth I saw about myself, brought me to the truth with a capital T. That's what happens.
Perfect. Love it. Love the capital T truth. Thanks again, Bill. That was a great RICO 12 weekly speaker meeting for all addicts and those wanting to learn more about addiction and the recovery therefrom. If you found value in this or other RICO 12 speaker meetings, please, once again, take a moment to go to the podcast platform of your choosing and leave a rating and review. It really does help us work our 12th step by carrying the message of recovery to more addicts who suffer. If you have any other questions or would like to interact with other members of our community, please go to www.rico12.com/forum and join in our community and ask those questions and answer others' questions that will come up. I invite the audience to come back next week. Our speaker next week will be Harvey. We're having a second time speaker next week on Friday and really excited about his topic. It's going to be something like, I got this. Oops. No, I don't. And it's going to be a great topic. If you have not yet gone to rico12.com and submitted your email address, you only need to do it one time. Please get on the invitation list so you can join us live each Friday at noon Central Time. Now, Bill has asked us to say the Serenity Prayer to launch us off into the rest of our day. Bill, would you like to say that or would you like me to?
I can say it.
Please, that would be great.
God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thine will, not mine, be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Keep coming back, everybody. It works when you work it. So work it. You are worth it.
Standing still a moment, carving out this time, reflecting on the landscape of this life of mine. Peaks too high to conquer, streams too wide to cross, troughs too deep to walk through without incurring loss. Yet here I am, still standing tall, despite the rough terrain. One like me survived the storms and walked through wind and rain. Still standing, I will fight the good fight, still searching for glimmers of light, feet still on the ground. I can still be found, standing still.
My wings are torn and tattered, but I know I still can fly. I may not soar unfettered, I may not rise too high.
Recorded in the book of life and binded with the seal